Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Capital Connection. I'm Conan Smith, the president and CEO of the Michigan Environmental Council. And today we're going to have a great conversation about the state of nutrient pollution in Michigan. This is an issue that perennially pops up, especially every spring and summer when we see algal blooms in Lake Erie. And we've been talking for a long time about the need to do better control of nutrient runoff in order to protect the inland waters of the state. We're really fortunate today to have a couple of fantastic experts and activists with us. Megan Tinsley, who I think, Megan, this is your first time on the webinar, is that right?
Yes.
Megan joined us just in September of last year as our water policy expert, and she has been learning Michigan's ways. She came to us from the Florida and New Jersey Audubon societies, and is now bringing those skills as policy expert to us here. So Megan, welcome to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And a longtime MEC friend, supporter, and ally, Pam Taylor from the Environmentally Concerned Citizens of South Central Michigan. And Pam, you rolled ECCSM off your tongue earlier today, which I still get tangled up in.
Me too.
Welcome. You have been doing so much good work, monitoring, observing, bringing attention to the issue of concentrated animal feeding operations. Can you tell us a little bit about what Environmentally Concerned Citizens of South Central Michigan is up to?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm in a weird sort of way, I'm happy to tell this very sad story that infects most Michigan residents. My story about getting involved in this goes way back to my own roots in Lenawee County. One branch of my family came to Lenawee County in the 1830s to clear the land and farm, and they settled along the banks of the Raisin River. The farm that my brother and I now own, and where I lived for many years before moving up to my tiny house, has been in my family since 1906. In fact, my great-grandmother was born in a log cabin about 2 miles north of that farm. Wow. I'm the 7th generation of my family to live in the area. And I first got involved in a major way in environmentalism, and especially in water quality, in the late 1980s, when a low radioactive waste dump was proposed for Riga Township in Lenawee County, where I come from. My parents' home was actually is actually along the banks of the Raisin, and my ancestors came, as I said earlier, settled within about 2 miles in the same area. I met Lynn Henning through that effort, and many people know who she is, CAFO fighter extraordinaire. And she became my mentor, and she's moved on to Socially Responsible Agriculture Project and works on a national basis. And I've kind of stepped in to fill the void that she left with ECCSCM. That group was created in the late 1990s, early 2000s by neighbors who were concerned about the growing number of CAFOs, or confined animal feeding operations, that were coming into the Hudson area, Western Lenawee County, Eastern Hillsdale counties. I am acutely aware downstream of the water quality problems that these farms cause here. ECCSCM was warning people about nutrient pollution and algae blooms for many years before the 2014 water crises in Toledo. As far as the reporting that I've done, I did some digging to find out exactly how many of these farms were in the Western Lake Erie Basin, the statistics about manure production, and then this information was mapped by watershed, not by county or state, which is the first time this has been done using current information instead of older ag census records. Since then, ECCSCM has added monitoring for different genera of harmful algae. Difference between true algae, plant algae, and harmful algae or blue-green algae is substantial. This is actually, harmful algae is actually a bacteria that produces toxins. We also monitor for to identify the sources of the fecal contaminant Bacteroides. We look for human and livestock DNA in tributary streams in our area now. We continue to monitor, as we've always done, for nutrients, nitrates, ammonia, and orthophosphate, which is the limiting nutrient for harmful algae, along with E. coli and other signs of livestock waste pollution. And I'm happy to just bring people up to date in addition to a watershed moment and follow the manure, the two big reports. We're working on a project to match the DNA footprint, the genetic footprint of the DNA in the Microcystis genus of cyanobacteria with that of the Microcystis found upstream. We're trying to draw that connection between the actual harmful algae that you find in the Great Lakes and from upstream sources. So we're working on that now too.
Let's take a little step back. Megan, can you tell our guests a little bit about what confined animal feeding operations are and how they relate to the health of our rivers and lakes in Michigan for folks who may not be as familiar?
Sure. So the confined animal feeding operations concentrate a large amount of livestock in a very small area. So the goal is to, in Michigan, dairies are the predominant CAFO as well as some hogs. But they're raising a lot of animals to produce the product that they intend to sell. And of course, with a lot of animals comes a lot of manure waste, which is very high in nutrients. So in order to raise these animals and do your farming operation, you have to have a place to place that waste. And being high in nutrients, when it washes into the water, as it does after precipitation events, those particles of nutrients along with the soil end up making it to our waterways, eventually to Lake Erie. And those are what fuels these toxic algal blooms that we've seen.
So Pam, this kind of farming is really different from what you described your family doing 100 and more years ago. We're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of animals in a small space. They produce waste the equivalent of some small towns and cities, right?
Right. If you use, most of the CAFOs in Michigan are dairy CAFOs, and the EPA actually has calculated how much waste is produced. There are charts that you can look at how much waste is produced per dairy cow per human. And the ratio is roughly, for the math's sake, I'm going to underestimate a little bit. It's really one dairy cow produces the equivalent waste of 24 people each day. I like to say 1 to 20 because people can do the math in their heads. So for the average 3,500 cow dairy CAFO, that would be 70,000, the equivalent of 70,000 people each day.
Yeah. So
if you have 13 or 15 of these in a small watershed, it becomes a problem.
Yeah, and even if you just have one that's got no discernible way to manage that waste, that's, to put that in context, folks, that's the size of a city like Royal Oak, Michigan. That's a lot of waste that has to be managed in a very small space. I think, Pam, you estimated through your research that there are something like 12 million animals in CAFOs, and they produce about 630 million gallons of manure every year.
It's even worse now, actually, Conan, because that was a couple years ago. We're now up to, at that time, I think we had 272 CAFOs in Michigan. We're now up to 290. So more so.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing. What does it mean to have these kinds of operations in communities near where you're operating, like your home turf, which is, this beautiful, iconic Michigan farmland? Is it being transformed, though?
That's an excellent way to put it. I mean, it's, and I've said this before, for me, it's like watching a slow rolling dystopia take place. Just kind of look around, actually take a minute to see what's really happening. And it's really quite depressing. We've documented over 4,700 environmental enforcement actions against just the 13 CAFOs that are in our area. We monitor 51 sites here in 21 Michigan townships. And besides our normal stream studies where we do, we come out every year and check certain streams, monitor them over a season. Besides those, we also do incident responses where people call us when they see a discharge or another problem. That's a significant part of the 4,700 environmental enforcement actions. We visit the site, we take photos, we take water samples or whatever else is needed. We walk the person through the reporting process and help where needed. Sometimes people feel very intimidated, and we try to help people through that. We've reported so many discharges and stopped so many imminent potential problems that I can't even count them. I've lost count. This means better water for everybody, even if people downstream aren't very aware of the issue. And this is true whether you are in Monroe, any of the city of Detroit water intakes, because Saginaw Bay is certainly having as many problems as Western Lake Erie Basin is, whether you're on Lake Michigan, the Lake Michigan side of the state of Michigan, near Lake Macatawa, Grand Rapids, anywhere from Holland up to Muskegon. This is a problem for you because it affects your drinking water. This means also cleaner water for recreation, whether you're a boater or swimmer, whether you like to fish, and for the wildlife. Anybody who uses the water at all. If we can keep the discharges, keep the waste out of the water here, it's better for everybody in Michigan.
Let's take a look, Pam, at the distribution of these things across the state. We often think about it as maybe a far away or distant or isolated problem, but you've helped us learn that this is all everywhere in Michigan, it feels like, and certainly our most vulnerable watersheds all have CAFOs within them.
That's very, very true. Like, I think this map perfectly shows what I talked about earlier. Whether you live in the Saginaw Bay region, anybody who gets their drinking water from any intakes from Bay City all the way down to all the way around in Lake Huron, Lake St. Clair, the Detroit River, all the way down to the Toledo line to the Ohio state line, and certainly, you know, people in Ohio too, but look at the western side of the state too. Look at, there are major water intakes for cities on the Lake Michigan side too. And it's just, we're very active here. We have a very active citizens group who spends our own money and time to go out and monitor these things. But I'm guessing the problem is at least as bad in other places too.
So we talk a lot about Lake Erie as being one of the places where it's really evident that these are having an impact. And this is a map of the Western Lake Erie Basin, where we can see a cluster of these these concentrated animal feeding operations. None of them have what you would call a traditional wastewater system, right?
Oh, no.
So,
No, they use just a untreated lagoon system, like maybe a very small municipal community of maybe 300 people would have to use. They just use lagoons.
yeah, can you go into detail for our audience about like what is a lagoon? What are they actually doing out there?
A lagoon is a cesspit where untreated waste, including sewage, cleaning chemicals, the EPA has identified basically 300 different substances are stored. It's mostly, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this, animal manure and urine mostly. And that untreated waste is spread on fields that are used to grow crops, your food crops. The problem, I don't know how much depth you want to go into here, but the problem in our heavy agriculture areas, and Saginaw Bay would be the same thing, and as Lake Erie, these were once Great Lakes bottoms, and they were, yeah, great area. They were currently underwater, so, and the soil does not drain very well. Same thing in the Lake Macatawa area. Sure. The farmland is drained by miles of subsurface drain tile, just like a city sewer system, or the land would be a swamp and you couldn't farm it. Mm-hmm. So problem that we have two problems here. Too much livestock waste is being applied in too small of an area using inappropriate practices for storage and application. So because in a pasture-based system, using cows again, they're out on a pasture. There's so many acres per cow in a good pasture-based system. They distribute their manure naturally, if you know what I mean, and in the right quantity, or manure is composted for the short times that they have to be in the barn during inclement weather. It's dry composted and then applied on the field. But when you're just slathering it, is when the problems start. In addition, here in these areas that I just mentioned, we have miles of subsurface drainage tile, just like a city sewer system. And what these do is they take, so that the land isn't swamped during farming season, these remove the surface water and take it to the man-made ditches, natural streams, and then down into the, great slide, down into the open waterways where it flows down into the Raisin or the Pine River or the Maumee or any of the other rivers.
So to contrast that with like a municipal system, so you've got underground drain tiles, which are acting very much like our sewer systems in a city, right. Only at the end, there's nothing to capture it. Like
there's no treatment plan. It just goes right into the river or the waterway. And the problem, this happens because these farms produce more manure than they do milk or meat. And they have to store the waste somewhere because they can't, it's a matter of time and money. So they built these huge lagoons, add a tremendous amount of groundwater to the lagoons because the waste has to be liquid enough so that, or has to have a low enough solids content is what I mean, so that they can pump it through the equipment, the pumps, the hoses, the irrigation equipment, the injectors. And the more water you add to it, the more likelihood it's going to go either in the sandy areas, go down into the groundwater reservoirs, or in areas like ours, into the tiles and out into the open waterways. And nobody knows where those tiles are. Ours were installed in the late 1800s on our farm. And while we installed some new tile in the 1980s, and I have maps of those, we don't know where the old tiles are until they break.
Sure, I have a tile here and on my property, and I couldn't tell you where it is. Like I'm not even sure we needed a permit to put it in. I'm just trying to control the water. Megan, let's talk a little bit about our policy responses to this. Most recently, as soon as you came on board, we threw you into Lake Erie's management plan. Can you talk a little bit about how the state has been approaching this problem and what some of the shortcomings to our policy intervention are?
Sure, and I think it's important to note too, so we're focused for the purpose of this discussion heavily on CAFOs. So that's one type of agriculture in the basin. There are other types of agricultural activities as well that may not be applying animal manure, may be applying chemically produced fertilizers. Those all sources are contributing to the blooms in Lake Erie. But what we've seen, from a general perspective on the state is this continued reliance on practices that are voluntary. So without a lot of teeth in saying, agricultural production must, do this, they must limit in their inputs to nutrients in all of the fertilizers. It's like a set of sort of practices that they can choose or not to choose to do. And what we're saying with Pam's help is that we have to do more. Like the scale of this problem is too big to continue to rely on the things that we've been doing for decades, which have really shown no real response. So we have reduced phosphorus levels to Lake Erie when we controlled and went in and better took a look at the point source reductions coming from wastewater treatment plants. But the scale and of the non-point source pollution and getting at that is a much more difficult problem. We seem a little bit stalled in sort of making progress at the rate that we need to. But some of the things that we're recommending, and we can get into the case as well that MEC is engaged in with Pam's help related to how the CAFOs are regulated. But we need a diversity of approaches. We need to focus perhaps more on wetland restoration. Maybe we can take some of the state funding that's available currently for water infrastructure projects and devote that to some treatment on farm where we're actually treating this waste for what it is. It's waste. It shouldn't be traveling directly into our waterways. So by diversifying what we're doing, instead of just relying on the way that things have been for a while, we'll be able to take little bites out of the problem.
So Megan, you mentioned point source and non-point source pollution challenges. For folks on the webinar, a point source is a place where we can identify pretty clearly that is generating and discharging pollution. Point sources are required to come to the state and get a permit. Non-point sources are more general. And in the case of CAFOs, they operate under one general permit. Can you or Pam talk about like how that works and why it's not effective?
I'll start off, Pam, and then you can fill in what I don't cover. But generally, the state went to revise in 2020 the CAFO permit that was guiding operations for the larger operations. So not so much mid to small, but the larger animal production facilities. And they came up with, based on comments from Pam, MEC, several of our partners, pretty significant improvements to how CAFOs should be managed to reduce their environmental footprint. Unfortunately, those improvements were challenged by farming interests. And so here now we have the case currently in court. And in the meantime, these large operations still operate under the existing permit that is not protective enough.
Want to talk a little bit about what we're arguing in the courts?
Well, just to continue on with what Megan just mentioned, the Farm Bureau and the Michigan CAFO owners, and that the general permit, by the way, covers the CAFOs that qualify as large CAFOs, not the medium or small CAFOs, which would be a dairy facility of 700 or more cows. They challenged the very small changes that Eagle made to the 2020 Michigan NPDES, another acronym, NPDES, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, CAFO permit renewal, which is a waste permit, just like your cities have to get. They challenged the small updates that Eagle made, which were necessary and which we've been fighting for years. Specifically, environmentalists wanted science-based changes, common sense things like reducing winter CAFO waste applications, restrictions on waste applications in watersheds that are designated by the EPA as impaired, better decision-making tools, and upgraded reporting requirements to fill in the gaps in the previous permits. And right now, all testimony has been submitted. I'm not sure that the briefs have been filed. Maybe they have by now. It was conducted over Microsoft Teams, so the process was a little different than normally one of these lawsuits would be. But the judge said it'll take him some time. It's a complicated case, and we should expect a decision next fall. As someone, I just wanted to throw this out here. I am a farmer. I mean, I was a farmer. I raised pigs and chickens, so I understand the system. Without the subsidies that are given to CAFOs and directed to CAFOs, pasture-based farming, more sustainable farming would be economically competitive. So I just want to throw that out there. That's for another webinar. This is about Lake Erie and harmful algae blooms and CAFOs, but it might be worth investigation at another time. So. Yeah,
I really appreciate you raising that, Pam, because we all have a vested interest in ensuring that our food supply is secure. The approach that the federal government, supported by state policies, has taken has really focused on the generative capacity, not the sustainability. And so we really could stand to rethink that in light of what we've come to learn about the environmental and ecological impacts of that industry, for sure. And it's all part and parcel, right?
Exactly. Right now, we are working on the Lake Erie Adaptive Management Plan. I hope I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. I know Megan's going to pop in here too, but we believe that progress in reducing phosphorus should be driven by measurable numeric decreases in phosphorus, not by the flawed models that are currently being used. Right now, we have a current system of what they call best management practices, and it's voluntary. And also, and it's a great program actually when it's used properly. But it was designed to build healthy soil, and it works very well for that. It is not right now. It's being misused as a pollution control model, and it is not working. The improvement is shown by acres enrolled versus pounds removed, and the best management practices within it just don't work as pollution controls for heavily tiled areas. There are too many variables that change from year to year, and there's lots more, way too much for this webinar, but there are better options. We think that taxpayers deserve some accountability, measurable evidence based on water quality improvement, that these programs effectively meet phosphorus reduction goals and benchmark dates, because taxpayers are spending millions of dollars on this.
So I want to highlight that next week we have two fun and important days of recognition. On the 22nd, Tuesday, it's World Water Day, which is also my birthday, by the way.
Happy
so
birthday.
While you're celebrating, lift a glass of the pure stuff to me. And then the following day is National Agriculture Day. These give us an interesting opportunity next week to tie together our need for clean water and our need for a vibrant and sustainable ag system. How would you like us to be celebrating or taking action next week?
Megan, you want to take that?
Sure. I thought about this ahead of time. Sort of what would I like to see this sort of holiday and day of recognition, let's say fast forward into the future 10 years. And I would say I would like to see us talking about these problems with Lake Erie. Algae blooms that get so bad we shut down the drinking water source for millions of people. I would like for us to be talking about that in terms of the past, like how we talk now about how the Cuyahoga River caught on fire. And that's just amazing to us right now that the pollution could be so bad. And I hope that we can make enough progress on this issue that we're talking about it in terms of the past.
I'm going to take a longer view here, because I'm thinking maybe 20, 30 years ahead, and I will not be here then. I'm just going to throw that out there. So I tend not to think in that in that time frame, but lately I've been thinking about it a lot. It's funny how you get old. When you get older, you think of what kind of world you're leaving behind. For the future, I'd like to see truly sustainable agricultural practices, less commodity monocropping, where most of the grain we raise goes either for biofuels that use more energy to make than they produce, or for confined livestock feed, or for export. And I'd like to see these livestock farms broken up so that they aren't raising so many animals in one place. This is happening now. For economies of scale, and the system we have now only exists because of the massive farm bill subsidies that support it. If the money were to go to what I call people food, being fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, pasture-based livestock, I think that consumers would benefit, because industrial and factory farming would not be competitive. If the government's going to put its thumb on the scale, it should be toward the consumers rather than the producers. Food prices are artificially low now because of these massive subsidies, and now we have even more dollars to deal with the transferred costs of waste disposal. I think we need to be looking at helping people and jobs and sustainable local food production, not polluters, not the ag lobby. And I think that our water, soil, and air would be healthier for generations to come.
Well, those are great points from both of you. And if you have in the audience an opportunity next week to reach out to particularly local lawmakers at the county level, where a lot of this conversation happens. Remind them about the future of agriculture and the future of clean water, and ask them to get involved. We could use a better system, and it's certainly one that we have the intelligence and experience to develop and grow. Megan, Pam, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been really informative, and you know, we could talk lots more about it, and I hope we do in the future. These issues are not going to go away, but our action and activism collectively at the Environmental Council and with environmentally concerned citizens, it's a great partnership, Pam. Thanks for your leadership across the state.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank again, Michigan Environmental Council. You've been a steadfast partner for many years. We appreciate all of our support from the NGOs, and you guys have certainly carried the torch. We are literally a small grassroots, in the most honest sense of the term, group of people who were trained by excellent, very knowledgeable people from the EPA, from the state of Michigan, who are crawling around here in the ditches. And it's hard to actively promote our findings, and you've given us an outlet to do that and helped us lobby for changes that need to be met. So thank you.
Well, you guys are the heart and soul of this movement. Thank you all. And everyone, I know there were a lot of questions and comments that were posted in the Q&A and the chat. Please know that our staff will follow up on all of those with Pam and Megan, and you'll get a follow-up email with the answers to those. Meantime, thanks to both you, Megan and Pam. Happy World Water Day, happy National Agriculture Day next week. And I look forward to seeing you both in person sometime soon. Take care.